Hey, it's Glenn, and welcome back to another episode of the Books I Love. And if this is the first time you've seen one of these videos on my channel, or floating out there in YouTube land, these aren't book reviews. These are very short videos. I'm not gonna spoil the plot for you, probably. I mean, I'll tell you if I'm about to. Some books have been so short, there's no way I can talk about it without spoiling the plot. Anyway, it's just really me talking about books that I love and why. So this episode we're going to talk about A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. So this one is, I kind of fell in love with this book while I was on vacation. Well, a working vacation. I went on a vacation from my um job running a youth program for a week or two to go work on writing stuff. And I took my Kindle with me and I'd always wanted to read these books. And so it was interesting. It was 2012. I know that it was the year 2012 when I read this book because I took note of the fact that it had been written in 1912, published in 1912 at least. And shortly thereafter, after I read this book, Disney announced they were doing a movie of it, which, they'd been trying to make a movie out of this book since it came out. So it had been in development hell for literally a century. But anyway, so I read this book and it was just so fun. Like it just the reason I love the book, it's kind of like some other creators' works, like I've talked about Kevin Smith being permissive in writing dialogue the way that I experience it in life. Um, Anne Rice is permissive. Like different writers they've told me it's okay to break this rule, to, you know, do it your way. And I think Edgar Rice Burroughs is permissive to me in that he's doing, I mean, 100 years before I'm reading this book, this guy was writing pulp fiction, just fast-paced adventure stories that still have depth. He's doing interconnected universes. John Carter, who's the protagonist of A Princess of Mars, exists in the same universe as Tarzan, which also came out in 1912. But A Princess of Mars was his first publication, and I mean, it was published under the title Under the Moons of Mars. When they put it out in a hardback or whatever, it was the title changed to A Princess of Mars. And the movie based on this novel is just called John Carter. So I don't know, man. I don't know why we have to change the title so much. All of those titles work. But yeah, I mean, pretty much I love this book because it shows me, like the guy who wrote Tarzan, a perennial classic that a household name, he just wrote crazy pulp stories. Like he wrote so much. He was a prolific author. And I know like I haven't gotten far enough into Edgar Rice Burroughs. I haven't read everything he's written. I started with The Princess of Mars and I was going through in publication order because that's the way I like to take in anybody's work. But I've been told that some of it's really racist. I haven't gotten there. Thus far, I love Edgar Rice Burroughs. Then the anything to deal with race, like in Tarzan, I thought for 1912, Edgar Rice Burroughs came through as fairly enlightened, like fairly woke in his observation on racism. Like, but that's another book, Tarzan. We'll probably do that one here. So I won't get into that. But there's nothing racist about A Princess of Mars aside from the fact that John Carter was a Confederate soldier at one point. So, but there's nothing in there about that except it's just kind of it's the time period in which this story takes place. And, he was alive during the Civil War, so he had to be on one side or the other, I guess. And, I don't think that's problematic. I think modern society wants everyone to be perfect all the time. I think it's okay for characters to have flaws. It's okay for characters to be, in the 1860s and fighting in the Confederate Army in the United States Civil War. That doesn't mean the author or the book is pro-slavery. It means this character fought for the Confederacy. And as far as I've gotten in that series, because I haven't finished the Mars series, but they haven't even talked about how John Carter felt about the Civil War or why he was fighting for the Confederates. So it really has no bearing on the series as a whole, but like again, I don't feel like characters are required to be flawless. I think flaws make them more real. Like I got a note in a book of mine that hasn't come out yet. The Legends of Nod book 6, Joran and Galen. My editor had written in there early in the manuscript because she didn't see where the story was going yet, but like one of her comments was, I hope you don't think this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is what their relationship is like. It's not perfect, and neither is anyone else's relationship. So, don't know why I got off on that tangent. It has nothing to do with why I love A Princess of Mars. But anyway, yeah, so it's permissive in that you don't have to worry about being writing a literary masterpiece. You can have fun. You can write fluff, pulp fiction, and, just to entertain. And you can still work depth into the story. It can be more than it appears to be from the outside, which basically defines my Legends of Nod series. Like to me, the Legends of Nod is very Edgar Rice Burroughs, except that the protagonist of that series is openly gay, whereas Edgar Rice Burroughs' characters were questionable. Like, or Edgar Rice Burroughs himself, like John Carter and Tarzan both. It's like they're always naked. He's always describing their muscles and just their physiques and their nudity. And I'm just like, is there something you're trying to tell us, Edgar Rice Burroughs? But, that's pure speculation from being a reader. There is no historical evidence that I'm aware of that Edgar Rice Burroughs perhaps went both ways, or at least in his head. But I do always find it humorous when he just goes on and on about the physiques of these manly men, these fighting men, these men of men. Like I put some of that stuff just as an homage, sort of, in my I have these short stories. The first one is An Unexpected Snow, and the second one is called In Wine Lies the Truth. And there's this superhero type character in those stories. They're very campy and silly, but I do put a lot of Edgar Rice Burroughs isms in there just because I think it's fun. It's funny to describe this pulp hero the way that Edgar Rice Burroughs would have described him. And I mean, yeah, and the fact that this book introduced me to Edgar Rice Burroughs is one of the reasons I love it so, because I went on to read Tarzan, and then, I was going through in publication order, so I read some more obscure stuff, and it was all really creative, and I know he wrote it really fast. He just was constantly writing and publishing, and all the interconnectedness of it. I'm like, that's how I write. He writes like he's doing a comic book universe, and that wasn't even a thing when these books came out. There wasn't any such thing as the DC or Marvel universes, but he sort of was one of, at least one of the people who originated that format, like I know H. Rider Haggard did some stuff like that. Even Dickens had had a serial novel where the connecting story where the characters would be telling stories, but that's what it was, and it would be characters from his different works. So he probably did it the earliest, but doing it on more of a comic book scale, Edgar Rice Burroughs and H. Rider Haggard, I don't know which one of them did it first or if someone did it before them, but that's the way I write my fictional continuities. And like, because I was reading this one random Edgar Rice Burroughs novel, and Tarzan shows up in it. Like he's not doesn't do much. Like they just kind of go to Tarzan's house. So and I was like, oh, that's cool. And it was set like years after the Tarzan novels at the time had gotten to, so it gives you some foreshadowing as to where the Tarzan series is going. So anyway, it's cool, and I've rambled on about irrelevant things. So, like I said, these videos are short. But A Princess of Mars' basic premise is this guy, John Carter, who's always been in his 30s as far as he can remember. So, I mean, he's immortal without explanation, and that's fun because why not? He kind of just goes to sleep and wakes up on Mars, or Barzoom, as the Martians call it. And of course, when he gets there, he's completely nude because his clothes didn't make the journey with him. And he's, of course, got the manliest physique, and he's jumping around like a flea on Mars. He's able to do that and completely naked, which is fine because everyone he meets is also completely nude. Like the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate sued a comic book company in relatively recent years because they were doing a comic book adaptation. I mean, it's over 100 years old now. It's in the public domain. I think the Burroughs estate still holds some of the trademarks, but yeah, so this comic book company didn't get permission. They didn't need to do an adaptation of this novel, and they did it accurate to the book where everyone is ass naked. And so the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, I thought it was hilarious that they sued them for this because they thought their depiction of things was damaging to the brand, like with John Carter's wang flopping around and all the aliens, their genitalia very visible. Like, but I was thinking that that's an absurd statement to say that the nudity is damaging the brand because that's literally how Edgar Rice Burroughs told us these things went down. It's a very accurate adaptation of the novel. So, yeah, I mean that's the basic premise. Like he meets the Martians, he falls in love, he fights battles, he has heroic adventures. And there's a whole series of novels that follow that premise. So, yeah, I love A Princess of Mars. It's like one of those comfort movies you can just pop in and have fun. It's good stuff. So highly recommend if you're into pulp novels. So far, I haven't gotten to the really racist stuff if it's there, and it probably is considering the man's career started in 1912. But so far, I highly recommend Edgar Rice Burroughs. He writes quick, short, fast-paced novels. Good stuff. So yeah, that's all for this one. And if you want to check out my writing, my novels, my short stories, you can go to my author website, glennsladeclarkjr.com. If you would like to see this channel do well, you could, if you are So kind and so inclined. You can leave a like, comment, any sort of interaction. Helps us in the algorithm. And I'll be back next month with another book that I love.